opposed to the whole group that was here today in terms of, like, I think Anthony was thinking on like next steps, like what about today was helpful and useful? I mean, obviously all of it, but like going forward, you know, how do we continue conversations? How do we continue to learn from each other and think about, you know, is there a next, what happens next? I think one of the key takeaways that I got today, even from Claire's thing, is that I think students, once they have that diagnostic, if they're not proficient, they need assistance in what do I do now? And like they like those problems to access, but then if they're not directed to the proper problems to access, is it giving them some time? Mm-hmm. So I think helping students navigate what happens after the diagnostic is really an important piece. And having that be good use of their hearing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And for us, we have the quantitative data to say that visits to the Math Support Centre are beneficial generally. So we look at the 10-year period, all courses like beginner and advanced. The more you attend the Math Support Centre, better you'll end result. But it's the age-old problem of getting students who we really want to see in the door to the Math Support Centre. The ones that are likely to fail, ones that have anxiety issues around mathematics. We haven't solved that problem. We're getting those into the Math Support Centre. So I don't. Well, we can attempt to
that retention rate of over the 8 years, I think we have data for that. We saw 17% students who were studying a math subject came to some form of math support. And probably 60% needed to. And considering your 1%, $1 million per percent, I think our overall we were saving or we were retaining something like an extra 5 or 6% students that saw us the retention rate was 5 or 6% higher. So there's several $1 million a year just for the ones that we're seeing if we can get more students through the door.
Yeah.
So I'm right that we're all in countries where there's quite high fees to attend university. I wonder what it's like in countries where you don't even pay fees to go to university. So in Greece, in Greece, it's competitive to get into university, so you can't just go. But if you do qualify to go, you don't pay fees. So that's what Harris Stokas in the maths department said. Yeah.
What about South Africa?
We pay fees. Yeah.
Well, in Australia, it's a higher education. It's higher education contribution tax. So you don't pay to go to university, but once you're in the workforce and your income is above a certain level, your tax is slightly higher. Now, a lot of students don't realise that they're attracting that debt while they're at university. So they effectively think they're going.
And what happens if they don't graduate? Do they carry that debt? Is it per course that you take?
Yeah, it's a.
So if you repeat a course, you will be charged twice for it. So there is a.
But that's the other thing that they don't realise, because there's nothing up front, and they're not going to pay it until they're earning $60,000 a year or something. They just don't recognise that.
Yeah. And in America, fees are high to go to college.
They're very high.
Are they about the highest in the world, do you think?
Probably.
Yeah,
So,
the stories I've heard.
Yeah, I mean, if you get to, like, I work in a public institution, and so we're pretty good at capping tuition. So for in-state students, there's a cap, but that's just tuition. That doesn't include room and board. I mean, you're expected to live on campus and eat food, you know, of course. Books, textbooks are crazy expensive. So even if there's a tuition cap, it's still the peripheral costs are extraordinary. And so there's actually a lot of food insecurity and home insecurity among college students, because all the money is just going towards tuition. And then if you get support, it tends to be work support. And so then students who are in the greatest need then have to work on campus to offset some of those tuition support. So then they're working 15 to 20 hours a week. And that cuts into their study time versus their probably, their peers that don't have to work, have, 15 to 20 hours a week to do other things.
Would the typical student get a loan to fund their tuition fees, and hope to pay that back as they want?
Yeah, so you could get a loan, you could maybe get some grant money, but we also in the US, and I'm gonna get to side on this, but to be awarded a loan or a grant, you have to fill out the federal application for financial student assistance, the FAFSA, which, I had difficulty filling out, like I have my PhD and I could barely fill the form out. So this is like an impossible thing for most families. And in the past 2 years, they've had some technical things that went wrong with the form. And so like millions of people probably didn't get it filled out. And so there's such a barrier to even getting that sort of support that it's really, and you have to have a social security number and you have to put in your, whoever your guardian's financial. So it's really, really complicated.
Mhm.
And so we're not reaching a lot of students that we should reach all the time.
Go. So in terms of collaborations, that was one of our topic things to discuss. You shared, which is so simple and genius, just to write the names of the journals up. I've put them in the chat as well.
Yeah, brilliant.
Because
There's 50 plus maths education journals,
yes,
and really there's only a handful that are relevant to what we do,
right,
teach mathematics first years,
yeah.
or whatever it is. A lot of them are theory based, and I've been to those conferences, and I just find them, I know we're probably still being recorded, I find them a major waste of time, unless you're a real theoretician, but I don't see the impact they're having on students or on lecturers improving their practice. I just don't see it.
And you've seen it from both sides.
Yeah.
Because you did research in
Yeah.
pure math.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
And now you choose to go to the maths teaching
Yeah, I
conference.
just think you can have more impact.
Yeah, so Alison was telling me that you put her onto this wonderful UK-based conference. Is it annually?
Oh, Yeah.
Got such a large name. I'm gonna have to type it in the chat.
CETL,
SCEL
ETL, and then there's a hyphen,
hyphen
MSOR.
MS.
I think the CETL part is Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning.
Conference network science extension.
Yeah. And that's a lot of mathematics, statistics, and operations research.
Okay,
So I think it's a legacy thing. They got funded maybe 30 years ago in the UK at the start of this conference, and now it's almost self-funded now. We still have to pay a registration fee, but €200, £200. And it's held in Ireland, England, Scotland, Wales, 4 countries. It's cycles around those 4 countries. I think next year's in England.
This year's in Liverpool.
Liverpool, that's right.
okay.
And it is actually, we get about 120 maybe participants, and they're usually lecturers of mathematics or statistics at a university or technical university. And they're
Fabulous.
shared ideas, it's
So-
all practical
yeah.
stuff, like it's really.
Because the one thing that we have all in common is the Delta conference, which a number of people who are here were attending that
Yeah.
as their first ever maths education conference.
Yeah,
But Delta's on again this year in Brisbane,
Yes,
the end of November.
so the Delta one every 2 years, and it goes between South Africa, Australia, New Zealand mostly. But it's also been to Brazil. And yeah, so we're in the cycle of Australia, then in 2 years' time, New Zealand. And then when it comes back to South Africa, I think I'm gonna make a plug for it to go to the Kruger Park.
oh.
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be.
So we've done the coastal provinces for a while, and I think it's time to move it inland. But those are spaces where there are a lot of people who are teaching the
Yeah.
first year classes, and they love to teach.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I went to the South African Maths Society conference. They have an annual conference usually in December. And again, most of that is pure and applied maths. And there's little thin stream of
Yeah.
maths education. But it's useful to find those lone people. And then make connections. So
I'd
we got
like
some
to
people.
Throw into that as first year in maths in Australia, FYI maths, we have a
Okay.
2-day conference in late June, early July. It's in Melbourne this year. And it's similar to Kettle MSOR, in that it's maths support, maths teaching.
What's nice to think about that is you have an average to be published, you have proceedings from the conference. And then you have a special edition of the top journal, IJMS will do a special edition of the best papers, we call them, of Delta, but you can also get into proceedings.
Yeah, so the deadline for the IGMS is mid-April, I think. It's
That's right.
quite early. For the proceedings, it's September something.
Yeah,
It's worth thinking about writing. There was quite a few. I was on the editorial panel for the 2019 conference. We had quite a few papers from Africa.
Yeah.
Amongst other places.
the Australian conferences, looking back at the past conferences, tend to be the largest. Yes, maybe because there's the largest home body of community of maths education researchers. Yeah, and it's not an international conference. So UCT staff members every second year could apply for a grant for attending an international conference, but it covers probably your registration fee, and if you're lucky, maybe 3/4 of the flight.
Okay.
And food and accommodation is, well, you must be knowing if you had a few meals here, how nice it is for you. So,
Need a friend with a couch.
yeah, like, maybe we should expand the Delta conferences to include a couch surfing. But I think there's a lot of scope for digging into more issues here.
Yeah.
And I think it's useful to know, often in these areas, if you are feeling isolated, it's so hard to keep going when you know that this is a good and useful thing. But just even if there's no one in your institution who is doing the same thing, knowing that there's someone else somewhere who you can just say, I'm not going mad, am I?
Yeah.
It's like, I'm seeing these things. It's not just me. Yeah.
It's amazing how common the issues are across the globe, even across our own countries, but across. John and I know each other about 5 or 6 years. I know the first time like, oh, Australia, but exact same issues. Right?
Wow.
We have the same issues, even though we have very different entry requirements. All our students do mathematics up to age 18, which is very different in Australia. But once they come to university, the issues seem to be universal.
Very simple. Yeah.
So, from you guys, any questions or other comments that you've got? Or if there's anyone online who has anything you want to say, you may pop it into the chat.
I wanted to ask about, like, for me, it's really interesting to see people who are passionate about mathematics education just in general. Because I just started my journey now into mathematics tertiary education, and I never thought like real people exist. Like literally, because when you just go online, they just give you this article. Sometimes they don't make sense, but also like universities, they put kind of like higher priority on pure and applied math, and they don't take mathematics education as an aspiring research kind of like pipeline or fraternity. So I want to also ask from your side, how do you respond to that, and what also keeps you going? Because somebody just told me, oh, you're gonna do like, I'm from graph theory, so I did graph and I really loved it, but I was like, I don't want to continue with MSc graph theory, so I had to make a decision between the two, either MSc graph theory or mathematics education. And I'm like, this is the heart of teaching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like this will solve one of my like most of my frustrations and why I was exasperated from from high school to university. So how do you respond to that? And, you know,
Yeah, it can be quite demoralizing during term, I think, because I'll often get emails from colleagues who are pure mathematicians and pure statisticians that have a slight interest in education. Or they're passionate about their teaching, let's say, they put a lot of time into their lecture. And they might email me, Anthony, could you send me on one or two decent maths education articles around teaching functions of several complex variables, whatever. And without fail, I often reply, and I spend a lot of time in my reply, and I'll attach 2 or 3 papers. But without fail, within a couple of hours, the lecturer, and this has happened maybe 25, 30 times, lecturer will come back and say, Anthony, by the way, on question 6, the inequality should be an equality. Page 6. They find some mathematical error. They find some, because they feel like they're refereeing a mathematical error. And I just think like, I thought that's what you get in the paper, that they don't take the time to actually absorb what's going on. But again, there is an awful lot of maths education. I think they need to over 50 journals. There's an awful lot of rubbish out there in maths education stuff. And I can see why serious, hard mathematicians would just turn their eyes at that kind of stuff. But there is a lot of decent stuff as well. And I think it is starting to change. Like when I was in Australia in 2019, I think the AMS, the Australian Mathematical Society, which is hardcore mathematicians getting together at a conference around Christmas time. It was the first time it was a math education plenary, and Leanne gave it. Leanne gave it. So it was great to see that, because that hasn't happened any national. It's happened in Ireland now recently as well. But it's a sign that maths education is sneaking in there a little bit. But I'm part of the International Linear Algebra Society, and we go to a conference every 2 and 3 years, and there's proceedings for that, but only for the mathematics parts. They'll never accept a paper in mathematics education.
sure.
Yeah, it's terrible. And we've complained about it year on year, and they're not shifting. So within that hardcore linear algebra kind of community, they definitely look down on math. They're happy for us to attend the conference and put on our own little maths education symposium, but we won't get into the
I think a lot of it just has to be your own journey. I mean, as I said at the beginning, I think at the end of the day, I still feel meaning and value to what it is that I do, and that I'm creating opportunity and access for more students to potentially be research mathematicians or engineers or other things, because right now it's a pretty homogeneous group that still has access to those things, and the needle hasn't moved as much as it should have had in the past 20 years. So we really want to give opportunity. We need more people like all of us. We're going to dig and say, how can we support you? How can we make this, mathematics better, so that you have more things to choose from, in your own higher career. That makes me happy. It's just for more students to say, I can go off and do this, versus being pigeonholed. They don't have the background and saying, well, you can only choose from these majors over here. These ones not. And that's just not fair. Because they're off the table because they went to a crappy secondary school. It's not that they don't have the aptitude or the ability. They never had the access or the exposure. So really hard to correct primary, secondary school, but we can do a lot once they're on campus. And that's what I think that all of us are passionate about.
In Australia, it's something of a move to have academic education focused academics. So I'm a lecturer, education focused, which means that my work is mostly in maths education. Not expected to be researching mainstream mathematics. University of New South Wales has a couple of people who are professors who come up through the ranks as education focused academics. That's only happened probably in the last 10 years.
As well, we have teaching excellence framework, so you can become a lecturer based on your teaching. That's really a progression based on your teaching and your research into teaching, not just teaching.
Sorry, but at the end of the day, you're gonna get a lot more respect if you came into that education role via mathematics background. Because I know even on our campus, we have a school of education, but none of them have a degree in mathematics. And so they don't get a lot of voice at the table because they're not practitioners of mathematics. They've never taught a mathematics class, but they're doing some research on things and those conferences too. And so there's not much crossover with those conversations. We all, we've been in the classroom, we have degrees in mathematics. And then can take that and say, well, what does that mean in terms of being a practitioner and really understanding student learning when we really understand our discipline versus.
Yes.
This kind of diagnostic work for so many years, really you as the mathematicians, not the maths education people that, as you said now, as you find in schools of education who are not mathematicians, who research mathematics. What kind of conversational hubs that we set up, first of all, with those people in schools of education, and also more importantly, the kinds of learning about, what is required in that conceptual development has been fed back, for example, to the schooling community, to the schools of education community, because I think that is really important, because it is one thing, to kind of sit in the university sectors and deal with it, but we need to strengthen the system. So if you're not thinking about education as a bigger system, where you have, schools of education, let me tell you now that in South Africa, the people who are becoming maths lecturers in these BEd education courses are no longer people that have at least done a mathematics major BSc degree. So I'm in the education department. I don't have an honors in pure mathematics or a master's as you would have, but at least I've done a BSc with a maths major, and I am, lecturing to I'm lecturing to students who are going to be primary school mathematics teachers. The ones that are coming in now, that are applying to be lecturers, have come through this generous BA degree. So they have met with primary school mathematics. Everyone, I don't know how you're familiar with what the content is covered in a primary school training. They only go up to school mathematics. And that's not enough, even to be training primary school at the primary school level. So they coming in with that level of mathematics. They've done masters in learning, teaching, PhDs in what I call the soft stuff. Sorry, oh gosh. But they don't have the discipline.
Yeah.
And this is the big debate in this country. Some people shout me down and say, there's enough research that says only need to do this. Primary school management only need that. And it's a very dangerous debate.
It is.
And the same
Yeah.
no longer have, because we just do not have people like yourselves that have done, who have mathematics discipline, and we've gone on to go into understanding the theory of learning.
Yeah. And then have chosen to work in the field.
And then you chose to work in the field. So,
Yeah.
I don't know, in this country, I don't know where we're going. That's why I'm asking you, because in Ireland, I don't think in this country we have done the depth of diagnostic work,
Mhm.
I think, to have those conversations across the system. You know,
And we're also so busy with it, just trying to navigate our own spaces.
exactly.
So
exactly.
it's like, at UCT, the School of Education is for school-based level education. And perhaps more the sociology of education, that kind of, a political kind of lens on education issues. Whereas tertiary maths education is really like a very different niche. So, so now we have named tertiary maths education as a strand in the science faculty. So from this year, first students can register as tertiary maths education specialists in masters and PhDs. Last year, we had the first 2 honor students who chose topics in maths education. So it's growing. And over the last decade, the maths department has radically shifted. I think first when they decided they could in fact be led by someone who didn't have to be a pure mathematician who was A-rated for their research. The head of department perhaps could have other skills. So once they had cracked that, they became a lot more open to different ideas, and they had teaching-only posts implemented, and they acted on that. So now there are a number of people who are here in the maths department, and their job is not to do research in maths, but they are primarily teachers. So they get a double teaching load, which leaves them with very little time to do any research on maths education. But never mind, it does it shows you that there can be a career path in teaching at tertiary level.
And can they be promoted?
They can be, and the debate is now how it was a capped C then, and now moving to associate professor level is the pathway is they're chiseling away at making that possible for academic teachers.
Great.
It is,
Yeah.
and it's not that you can't do the research. In fact, if you want to get promoted, you will probably have to do something above and beyond just the basic job. But that now becomes feasible. Yeah. And in fact, what I think is that the more AI is coming into the picture, the more that need there is for human interactions to be at a higher level. So if you can go to Khan Academy numbers and AI can guide you there, they'll be like, right, go and do Don Sherman's questions on this, and then go and do like this on this, and then go, you know, and it can know you. And it can be like, well, because you have an interest in music and this, you know, maybe go over here. And the pathway for you, AI can do. But people like in Australia, I think there was this idea that when you could record onto records, people were like, oh, schools are all going to close because, you know, these rural students can get access to records, and you go and drop these like, you know, parcels of your maths kit in a box on a parachute and close down schools. And UCT, any contact university, why do we have students if UNISA exists? This is a online distant learning, the Open University in the UK. People want to be with other people. And if they're going to keep on paying money for it, they want it to be a valuable experience, which means we got to get the people business right. We've got to get the sitting in the room and engaging with content feel meaningful. And I think that is why the students are willing to take the diagnostic test, because they had the option to not come. I mean, maybe their parents forced them, but most of them realize this is better for me than sitting at home.
I just want to say, I was in India last year at the University of Chandigarh. And that's where I saw the most beautiful relationship between the mathematics department and the School of Education. So the PhD, pure mathematician, come to lecture, but she works very closely with the maths educator. However, the maths educator also needed to have a minimum of a master's in pure maths, and then must do a PhD in education.
Gosh. Yeah.
So you have someone with a PhD in education, pure maths, but they teach and they work together.
Yeah.
So when they are sitting and planning the teaching, the assessment of this conversations, obviously in this country, we don't have that luxury, because where do you find anywhere in this country people with master's degrees even teaching in faculties of diplomats?
Yeah, yeah.
So
But just imagine that we can train a chatbot based on the right knowledge. So at the moment, something like ChatGPT is unreliable because of what it's been trained on. But if you can train a chatbot to go and study these exemplary people, so maybe the decision is, who are you training it on? So you could say, let us find a person who is a mix of this, and this, tailor it for this audience, and then that chatbot can be that guide.
but I know, it's, when I chatted to the pure math teacher, because I was around to sit in on the lectures, and she was brilliant. And she said to me, it took me a while. Because I knew the work, I understood the mathematics, but it was only through me observing and engaging with the challenges these students had. And the conversations I had to have with my colleagues who were studying learning theories and why, and that those bigger dynamics that I started learning. So in other words, she was also learning about how to learn, but through the observation of the students, and then having these conversations with that. And so,
Nice.
it's also feeding back and building on your own knowledge of the subject. And I had that same experience 20 odd years ago when I sat with someone from the University of Jerusalem, was Anna Spah's PhD student.
Wow.
And I sat there and I thought I really understood mathematical concepts. But when we were engaging about the learning, I had to rethink what I thought I knew. So what I'm saying is, I think AI is wonderful, but I wonder if that will ever replace the human interaction and the observations of what's going on in practice. But as I said,
If we don't have the people to fill those
yeah.
roles and the time,
But then we need to start working towards,
yeah.
like there are brilliant young people, that need to fill those gaps in institutions, to build those conversations.
And then we have to make sure that it doesn't become a burden on trying to take the few people who they are and spread them across more than what they really should be.
Because they say that you're not generating sufficient pure mathematicians.
So I see AI as
They're
a,
gonna go.
yeah,
They're going to, the fields that need them, and who wants to be, like in schools, in schools of education. So there's a lot of issues,
Yeah.
challenges.
Yeah.
Thought this is back to advising. I think students really don't know what's possible in many ways. And so I think we fell into our roles, I think Anthony and I and Don too, that like no one ever said to me, if you go get a degree in pure math and then switch over into this, pedagogical space, this is gonna be the perfect, because no one was ever thinking that was possible. And so I didn't know it was possible. I just landed there kind of by, default. So I think over time we need to, and maybe that's what AI is perhaps best at, is reaching students with more information about what's possible. What are your loves? What are you passionate about? And then how do those fit together into these different roles? And so I think a lot of it's just information, because there's not a lot of us. I mean, Carolina Soara, there's a bunch of us, and Delta, but those numbers are pretty small compared to how many people are in this space. Yeah, and so, how do we recruit? That's what we need. We need a recruitment plan. for people to come on over. Come on.
Hmm.
I love the idea of having like a holistic approach to not only saying university, but also how can we both go back to the teachers. I think it's in Finland where they take their best student and they make them teachers.
Mm.
And imagine if you're taught by the best mathematician
Yeah.
who has went under a certain type of training of maybe pedagogy and
Yeah.
knows how to read the classroom and stuff like that. I think in South Africa, we have a problem of if I didn't get to become a doctor, I take teaching as a second option.
Mhm.
I'm gonna become a terrible math teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to become a medical doctor and I
Yeah.
didn't get accepted.
Yeah.
And now there's a teaching position that I took and I'm teaching your child. I'm not gonna do a good job. But also again, the policies around South Africa, the teachers are not paid well as well. So it's not an aspiring position as well. So I think one of the ideas I have is how do we also make education and teaching fashionable? Because it is fun.
Mhm.
And this is where most of the professions are coming from. Our doctors, our lawyers, we all come from there. So I think, yeah, that's just I thought it was
Yeah.
it's just a great one.
Good comment, yeah.
Mm. Right.
Probably with that, we need to wrap up.
Yes.